Well, hello. It is Bills Squad, and we are coming to you live here on the Locked On Bills channel. My name is Jeremy White. With me, Joe Marino and Jerry Ostroski, as we bring you this brand new venture as part of the Locked On Bills podcast and the Locked On Network. Happy to be here. We'll be live on YouTube for these shows and posting them where you get your podcasts. Lots to kind of catch up on and tell you who we are. But of course, I kind of want to turn it over to you, Joe. This is your channel. You've built this to what it is. It's an incredible resource for Bills fans, and Jerry and I are honored to be here to be a part of this.
Yeah, I'm excited to have some additional programming that is going to provide everyone something a little bit different. Everyone hears me daily monologue about the Bills for 30 minutes. That's not changing. We're not going to stop doing that ever. But now we're giving you 2 additional episodes per week, Bill Squad, where the 3 of us are going to be talking Bills, free-flowing, panel-style conversations that it's going to be fun to have someone to talk to. I usually just talk to the wall in front of me. So get to bounce some things off of you guys, share ideas, have some of my opinions challenged in real time. I'm looking forward to that. So I'm excited to serve Bills Mafia in a new way with additional programming that's going to include you guys. And I'm excited for this to launch and excited in particular to work with you guys.
Definitely. I have a lot of respect for both of you guys. I've spent quite a bit of time in terrestrial radio, Jeremy, so I know what it takes to do what you do for how you've done it for so long at a high level. It's a lot more work than people understand. And Joe, I don't know if there is a person covering one specific team that does a better job than you do as far as your work covering the Buffalo Bills. Tons of respect for you. So good to know you. We've had a chance to meet in Kansas City. One day, Jeremy and I get to meet in person, but lots of respect for you guys. Happy to be here. Happy to bring content to the Bills Mafia, and I'm excited about it.
You can comment on YouTube. You can join us throughout. Today's episode brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. We'll get to that. We've got a big, beefy draft prospect to get to. I thought we'd start, it's draft week, of course. The draft is Thursday, and the Bills, I think a lot of Bills fans are expecting them to go heavy defense. And I was going back to the Locked On channel, Joe, and I saw how to build Josh Allen's Super Bowl winning defense. Like that was the goal as soon as you hit the offseason, building that Super Bowl caliber defense. And they made some signings in free agency, but now we turn our focus to the draft and what pieces remain to fill to get that thing done. It almost looks to me, Joe, on some level, and Jerry, like this is going to be the next phase of a Sean McDermott defense after the transition we all saw the Bills just kind of go through.
Yeah, Jerry, I'm tired of the Bills defense letting Josh Allen down in these playoff elimination games. It's getting old. It's getting very old. I'm going to give you some numbers here. In these playoff elimination games, the last 5, so 4 to Kansas City and 1 to Cincinnati, more than half of the drives against the Bills defense have ended in a touchdown. 75% against the Bills defense has ended in points, whether it's a touchdown or field goal. They've only got 4 sacks in those 5 games. Like, enough is enough. Josh Allen's a special football player. This defense has got to stop letting him down. And I know that some people will say, well, Josh Allen had the ball in his hands the last 2 times with a chance to get the go-ahead score, and the offense couldn't do it. Well, maybe it'd be a little bit different story if the defense did something earlier in the game. Think about this past game against the Kansas City Chiefs. They score 3 touchdowns in their first 4 drives, and that puts undue stress on the offense. And so I think it's about this defense. Sean McDermott's a defensive coach. Let's get the defense in here that's going to stop failing Josh Allen in these playoff elimination games, and Josh can have the resume that he deserves as really one of the most exciting historic quarterbacks this league has ever seen.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, if they played a little bit of defense, a little bit, not even like the best we're not talking 85 Bears. We're talking about just a little bit of defense. They have the opportunity to win championships by now. And when I say championships, not just AFC, Super Bowl championships, the way that Josh Allen's offense has performed. But, I mean, again, you talk about it just historically bad, especially in the secondary. Gave up 68.5% completion rate last year. Just not good enough. And you'll find out from me being on the show, I am a front 7 O-line guy. I want to be strong up the middle. We might be terrible everywhere else on the field, but we're going to block and we're going to get after people up front. And that is just something. We got half that equation. This offensive line is elite, led by Aaron Cromer, but we've got to get better up front on the defensive line. And, we talk about secondary, and we'll get in that in a little bit as far as draft theories and who should go first and all of that. But, corners and often and defensive linemen, they go hand in hand, right? Pass rush creates great coverage creates pass rush. They've got to get better in that aspect and just overall get better defensively on this football team.
One thing about this conversation, I find myself always leaning to the offense, but I think it's because I end up wondering if they'll ever have the answers against a Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And the Super Bowl really drove that home for me, guys. When the Chiefs got dominated, I thought, man, they were right there for the taking, even if your defense wasn't all world, and yet they endlessly have answers against this McDermott defense. So, like, I'm with everybody that wants to get as many players on this defense, blue chip players, game wreckers, but it almost feels like I have to elevate to the game wrecker status just because I need someone that goes beyond coaching, because their schemes against the Chiefs in the playoffs are not up to it. So there's a little bit of like how much do they need on that side of the ball for me to have enough faith that that's going to be the unit that ultimately gets the job done.
Well, Jeremy, I think you mentioned what the Eagles did to Kansas City. How about what Houston did? I mean, of course, Kansas City won the game 23-14, but I mean, they were 4 of 11 on third down. They had 212 yards of offense.
Yeah.
So it's not like other teams aren't stopping Kansas City in the postseason. It's just that the Bills aren't. And Mahomes is awesome, right? His postseason numbers are awesome, but they're especially awesome against the Bills. So there's got to be a way to do this. And, you know, I think what's frustrating is, of course, Sean McDermott being a defensive-minded coach. And, you know, I think there's been some scheme stuff that has gotten in the way of it. And I think there's been a lot of defensive injuries late in the season. Like, it'd be nice for the Bills to, 2 years ago, not have to play A.J. Klein at stack backer, and Rapp's been injured and Benford went down, and Rasul Douglas is playing on a bum ankle 2 years ago. They've had a lot of injuries, whether Tre White, Von Miller, like important players. I give them some grace for that, but something has to happen here. I think part of it can be scheme, and I think some of the coaching influences that have come in, whether that's Ryan Nielsen and his background with pressure fronts, man coverage, Jason Raprovich, a guy that's got a long history of developing pass rush and defensive line. Pellegrino, the new DB's coach, coming over from New England, a lot of man coverage, a lot of pressure looks. You could see those coaching influences and feel like, maybe some of the scheme stuff will change, where even last year in those big games against Ravens and Chiefs, the divisional round and championship game, they played more man coverage than ever. I feel like they want to go a certain direction. And now I'm fascinated to find out if the personnel piece kind of aligns with some of these clues that the offense has provided, or excuse me, the offseason has provided us to really see where the direction of this defense is going, because I don't think it's a matter of, hey, you just have to get players. I think they have to evolve schematically as well.
You bring up that Kansas City matchup, and, Andy Reid cuts his teeth as an offensive line coach for Mike Holmgren as he works his way up to one of the best head coaches we've seen in NFL football. Not very many times is a Kansas City offensive line going to be their weakness. Andy's going to have that group playing well. Last year, they were a weakness, and we weren't able to take advantage of it. And you saw what the Philadelphia Eagles did to them up front, rushing 4. It wasn't like Vic Fangio came out there with some just crazy game plan that they've never seen. They whipped them man to man up front because their offensive line wasn't good enough. And then Kansas City, in retrospect, you look at them, they're struggling offensively because of that line. Their defense has played well enough the last couple of years to get them to the last game. So it's quite obvious that Buffalo's got to get better on that defensive side. They've got to do a better job up front, getting to the passer. And then again, of course, we talked about secondary. But, yeah, I mean, last season was the year, and we just weren't even able to – I mean, their tackles were not very strong, Kansas City's, and they gave up a ton of pressure with power. And we have power rushers and like Greg Rousseau and such. And we weren't able to take advantage of it. No push of the pocket, nothing there. And, I'm like Joe, when you see all these defensive line-minded guys coming in, obviously they've realized there needs to be a systematic change up front, and they're going to address it. So I would expect this group to be playing with their hair on fire this year. Whether they have the talent or not, you're going to see a different sense of urgency out of this defensive line.
Well, and Jerry, I don't think the questions for the Chiefs offensive line are going away right now. It's a great point, how disappointing it was to contrast the way that the Bills rush looked against Kansas City to the Eagles. And the Eagles are better. They had better players up front. They're deeper. I think they're 7 or 8 deep with legit players, where the Bills might have been 2 or 3 deep with legit players, and then you're playing a bunch of other guys that are rotational guys at best. So they had better players, but the point being is that they were able to take advantage of that Chiefs offensive line in ways that the Bills couldn't. But look at this Chiefs offensive line. It's not better today than it was then. It's worse. They traded away Joe Thuney. They signed Jalen Moore to be their left tackle, who's been a backup in San Francisco, and they need offensive line in San Francisco. They gave this guy $15 million a year, Jalen Moore, to be their left tackle. Juwan Taylor, they're still stuck with for this season. And so I think they're still transitional with their offensive line, and another ripe opportunity if you're going to be able to beat Kansas City to take advantage of what is shaping up to be a weakness for them when it comes to their offensive line in front of Patrick Mahomes.
One thing I see as a difference in the Bills' defensive line, lots of assets at end, not a lot in the middle. They draft Ed Oliver, they draft Dwayne Carter, and then it's kind of stopgap guys, right? They're always kind of filling in with some free agents or bringing guys back here and there. Draft history, whatever. Is this finally the year that they spend that first-round pick in the middle of the defense, or do you feel like they're going to chase end like they have quite a bit? I mean, as we're all talking about this, I'm thinking about how desperate they were for a defensive end by rolling out Von Miller in Game 5 2 years ago when he wasn't ready and he played and he couldn't play, but they rolled through the whole time with him playing that position. And last year, he ends up with their best PFF grade of rushers, and they let him go because they need help over there. So if you were to just kind of handicap it right now, bet it right now, end, tackle, if they're equals, what do they want first with number 30?
I'd hope it's the interior guy. I feel like the need is more pressing on the inside, where when it comes to defensive end, it's more long-term and cost control, where you have Bosa, who's on a 1-year deal, and if that doesn't work out, you don't want him back. If it does work out, he's going to be really expensive, right? He'll be still in his early 30s, like 31 years old, hitting the market after a great season in Buffalo. That's going to be really expensive. And then Epinesa is an expiring deal, and I think he's probably run his course in Buffalo, right, as a fine rotational end, but are you going to bring him back for a third contract? So I think when it comes to edge, you just more or less want to get ahead of those needs with a cost control player that can give you impact, where like you right now need answers on the inside. Right now, if the Bills are going to play a game with Larry Ogunjobi suspended for 6 games, your front 4 rotation is Oliver and Jones with Zion Logan, Dwayne Carter getting meaningful run behind them. So I think if all things are equal, the need is far more pressing to me on the interior than it is on the edge.
No, I agree with that 100%. And this situation goes all the way back to high school. I mean, this is college recruiting. There's a reason why these defensive tackles out of high school are making $500,000 now, $750,000, $1 million. They are hard to find, and they're hard to find in the NFL as well. And if that guy is there, you've got to take him. And, the problem for the Bills is sitting at 30. It's not really like they can just wait to get their guy. If they really think that they need an impact defensive tackle, which I believe we all think they do, they're going to have to press the issue a little bit. I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to think that Harmon and Grant and Nolan and these guys are just going to fall to 30 and you can sit there and wait, keep your picks, and get the guy you need. I think this is going to be a really interesting draft because those guys are really hard to find. There's only a few of them that are, I think, definite right off the bat, day one impact players. Bills might have to do some stuff in the first round, maybe move up 5-10 spots. Who knows? Maybe more. There's a lot out there to think that with all this draft capital they have, they're in a prime position to make a move. But if you want to get one of those guys, you're not going to be able to sit pat at 30. I think you're going to have to move to go get one of them because just like any level of football, to find that really, really impactful nose or 3 technique, you've got to go out there and get them.
You can hit us up on the chat on YouTube if you're with us live. Of course, we're going to be where you get your podcast if you're listening now. We have Joe's Bills-specific big board to get to in this show. Got it. We got the graphic. I got it in your show notes from Locked On Bills, Joe. You said you posted it there. That's where I snagged it from. So we're going to get to that when we get back. The Bills-specific big board. We can talk about some of these defensive tackles, defensive ends. I'm going to force you to talk about receiver because that's why I'm here. I'm always going to want a receiver. So we'll step aside quick. Be right back with Joe's Bills-specific big board and other NFL news that relates to the Bills, of course. This is Bills Squad on the Locked On Bills channel. And did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You have the opportunity, of course, with the Fire TV and Xbox to have a chance to play games just like anything else. Grab your paired controller, subscribe, sign in to your Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25. I've got lots of stories of how many times I've scouted college players playing that game, not just 25, but going way back. But you get ready for the draft with that. So, endless entertainment, 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies when it comes to your Amazon 4K Fire TV, Netflix, Prime Video, all of it. You've got lots of options there. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, first and second gen, and Fire TV Cube, third generation. So go ahead, snag that, and jump on College Football 25. See you over there. All right, so Joe's big board. Who's ready for it?
Bills. I've been working on this thing for 5 months. Hopefully, we're good to go here.
Bills specific big board. We'll go defense first because that we just spent the first segment there talking about defense and what they need. Defensive end, defensive tackle. I notice a theme here, Joe, that you're loaded on defensive end, you're loaded on defensive tackle, you're loaded on corner. Linebacker is depth, and then I guess I want to say you're just not really interested in the safety game, it would seem.
Well, yeah, and this is very, very specific to the Bills. I've evaluated a lot of players at linebacker and safety. I just made this very much tailored for my preferences, right? It's Joe Marino's Bills-specific big board, and so it aligns with the needs that I think the Bills have, and at other positions, it's more lean, but it's more appropriate to where I see the value. Like if the Bills are going to pick a linebacker, these would be some players in this range where it would make a lot more sense to me. And I did Andrew Makuba because the Bills hosted him on a 30 visit. So any player that the Bills brought in for a 30 visit, they are included. And then I tossed in Jonas Sanker as like a early day 3 safety that I kind of like. But this is heavily biased based on my own perception of the Bills' needs and where I think they should be making their investments on draft day.
Well, can I get you on Cole Bishop quick? He did not play a lot. I feel like Bills fans might not have a ton of confidence in him with good reason. And it felt like the Bills didn't trust him until they needed to. When I saw the stuff about Nick Emenwari and the RAS profile and the freakish athleticism, I checked Bishop's RAS score and it's a 9.8. Like, They already drafted a super athletic safety. Not to say he's the same kind of player, but to me, it would seem a little redundant to try and chase that position again when you just spent a pretty good asset on one that you must have liked a lot.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear what Jerry thinks about this, because I think one of the biggest debates out there is the Bills and the safety position, and is it an actual need, and do the Bills perceive it as an actual need? And obviously, you're coming out of a stretch of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, which is a legendary safety tandem. Impact was every week from those guys, and coming out of that, it wasn't that way. I mean, the Bills work through this season with Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp for the most part starting, and then Cole Bishop was like the young buck, and he didn't impress as a rookie. But here's what I'll say. The journey matters for Cole Bishop, where if you listen to him and even some of the coaches talk about him last year during the OTAs in May and June, you could tell the guy was drinking through a fire hose. Like it was moving fast, and it just didn't slow down for him, and it was a big ask. And so the next opportunity for that to really slow down is training camp. Well, the guy misses all of training camp in preseason. The next thing you know, he's starting in week 4 against the Houston Texans, and he was a disaster. And here's what I'll say. While he never really became a guy that was an impact safety, he got better, and he had to play a good amount because the Bills had injuries. And by the end of the season, no, he wasn't making impact and splash plays, but he was at least passable. And I think that's a good step for him, where going into this offseason, which I think is always a big deal. Like year 2 offseason for players has got to be a big deal, where you go from traveling the country, going to 30 visits, combine, the all-star circuit, jumping and running, all that stuff, versus now you're just getting ready to play safety for the Buffalo Bills. I think that's got to be a big deal for him going into this offseason. And of course, what's coming now, like the OTAs or the voluntary workouts start today. The OTAs will really get cranking up after the draft. I think he's going to be in a lot better of a position to step in and show what he can do. And so I feel like we've gotten into some bad habits of writing off a lot of young players for the Bills early. And then by year 2 or year 3, it's like, oh, yeah, there it is. There's the Spencer Brown. There's the Dawson Knox. There's the Josh Allen, right? There's been good player development. And I think we got to let Cole Bishop have his opportunity. They like this guy, man. They wanted to trade up for him last year. And I think the Bills are pretty selective with their safeties, and they really targeted this player. I'm kind of curious to see how he plays out this year. And so between him, the arrival of Derek Forrest as a free agent, who I really like, the Bills really like Taylor Rapp, whether we like him or not. The Bills like him. I just don't know that the Bills are thinking about a safety quite as much as maybe some of the mock drafts that I see indicate they might be.
No, I love Taylor Rapp. I mean, I'm all about headhunter safeties. Okay. I grew up a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Andre Waters, Brian Dawkins. Rapp to me is in that. Is he going to the Hall of Fame? No, but he's in that category. I love guys that intimidate over the middle, and I think he's one of those guys. You know, we'd like to see him not have the injury issues that he's had, and he's back there. I'm very, very comfortable. I love Cole Bishop. I think he is a prototype for what we want in a safety. But understand this, he was a rookie last year. They give him that moniker for a reason. And I don't think people quite understand. There's one thing about looking at a playbook and learning it, watching cut-ups on film and thinking you learn it, and then actually being on the field and feeling it, feeling where your body is, feeling the timing. I was always one of those types of players. I had to do the rep. I mean, I could say, okay, we need to go block him, but until I did it, physically move through the play, I wasn't comfortable. And those guys, there's a lot of timing, and there's a lot of stuff as far as body position and where they need to be on the field. And I was very, very optimistic seeing what we got out of Cole Bishop, knowing just how much he missed in the offseason. And, you're a rookie, so you're behind the 8 ball to begin with, then you're not on the field. It's really, really tough to get out there and do those things. Obviously, we saw him in Houston, made the mistake with the over-the-top touchdown pass, not deep enough, those types of things. I think that'll be all corrected this year. I think the sky's the limit for the guy. I think he's a prototype with what we want at safety. There's a reason why Bean, McDermott moved up to get him, because they saw the same thing. So you put him and Rapp on the field at the same time, I'm feeling pretty good about stuff. And then you bring in a couple of pieces to be able to back up. And, we've got Cam Lewis in a nightmare scenario that has played there and is viable. We know that DeMar Hamlin, while he's limited in some stuff, he can go out and play if we need him to. So we have options. We have backups that have got a ton of snaps in the NFL to back these guys up. I don't think we need to be as concerned about the safety room as a lot of people are.
On the line, a lot of names here on Joe's Bills-specific big board. One thing I want to just jump on here, Mason Graham, you have bottom half round 1. He could go as high as what? I've seen him mocked at 7, top 10. So you've got him faded a little bit. And the other names, Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon, Walter Nolan, these are guys I see quite a bit mocked to the Bills. These are very popular names, Joe. So, both of you on what these players could bring. I really want to get to the idea of the big guy, right? The one technique, the true nose. Kenneth Grant is supposed to be that, right? Will they have to move for him? Because it feels to me like no one knows this draft. It's a little bit more unknown than others because it's said to be lacking like the top 7 or 8 elite, blah, 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 whether that's quarterback, receiver, defensive. I see the middle getting very jumbled up, and that guys are going to fall that we probably don't think will fall. So, I don't know what you make of that, but it seems to me like there's a lot of uncertainty after like the 10th pick.
Well, first of all, this big board, nothing about it is intended to be predictive. This is like my own personal assessment of these players. So maybe the league thinks of Mason Grant as a top 10 prospect. I think he's a fine first round caliber defensive tackle. So that would kind of be the thought there on Mason Graham. I think the way that I've kind of said this in the past, if you go back to the 2019 draft and you had Quinnen Williams and Ed Oliver and Christian Wilkins and Jeffrey Simmons and Dexter Lawrence, like an insane defensive tackle class. I find Mason Graham to be a whole lot more like a Christian Wilkins who went just outside the top 10 than I do like a Quinnen Williams, who I think has this unbelievable ceiling to be a high impact player. So I like Mason Graham. I don't see him as a blue chipper like maybe some other people do. But Jeremy, I think you're exactly right. There's a lot of unpredictability with this draft. I mean, really starting at pick 3, Are the Giants going to go quarterback or not? And I think that sets off everything that happens from that point forward, where everything gets wonky. I've been working through mock draft scenarios with different people over the weekend and the last couple of days, and the things that you can talk yourself into in terms of possibilities are just all over the place. And that puts the Bills at pick 30 in a very uncertain situation, because could Derek Harmon be there? Yeah. If he was the 11th pick to the 49ers, I wouldn't be surprised by that either. Kenneth Grant, to me, is a player I love. I feel like the opinions are all over the place with this guy. I see him falling out of the first round in a lot of mock drafts from, big media guys. So I think there's a ton of unpredictability, and that, for as much as that might put the Bills in a position where, hey, go get your guys, you also might be able to just let it fall to you based on how things unfold in front of you. If you're in a situation where, you're going to have the choice of a Grant or a Harmon, plus corners that you like, edge rushers, the Bills could be, nobody loves picking at 30. I mean, other than your team was pretty good. That's a good thing. But like, for the draft perspective, kind of a range that the Bills have been in, and it's always a little uncomfortable having conversations right now, wondering, all right, who are the Bills really going to be able to choose from?
No, I really like Kenneth Grant as far as a guy that can play our style of nose. If you look at him, he's a big barrel-chested guy. He's big in the lower body, but he's got kind of some skinny calves and ankles. He's got a little bit of that knock-kneedness to him. He's twitchy. He can move real well. I think he's a guy that correlates well with what we do. I think he has all the tools as well, but he hasn't put them all together yet. I think he's got a good, he's got good hand strike. He can do stuff with his hands in the pass rush, but he's a little bit inconsistent and doesn't quite have it all together, which makes me feel good. If we do get him into Orchard Park, we've got 5 guys now that are coaching pass rush over the defensive line.
Right.
They can bring him along. I like his body structure better than I like Derek Harmon. Derek Harmon's a little high hipped for me. He's a little long legged. Now he's a cat daddy. He can go, but I'm not. I like the squatty body. I like dudes that are 6'4" and their inseam is about 30. I like short legs and long torsos. Yes, yeah. I like short legs, long torso.
Is this all low man wins mindset, really? Like, is that what that is? Like,
not to say that I was a expert at it in high school, but it is physics, guys. I mean, it's center of gravity. And when you're 6'4" and you got a 30-inch inseam, your center of gravity is a lot lower than a guy that's long-legged and high hips. So that's why I like Kenneth Grant. I think the problem for the Bills is, if this is any other year, maybe he slips down and people don't watch him as much. But when the guy that plays next to you is a projected top 10 pick, every time they turn the film on to watch him, they go, wait, who's that other dude that's over there as well? And so obviously Kenneth Grant's stock has gone up quite a bit because everybody's looking at Mason Graham. I don't know, Joe. The guy that I don't really have my a finger on, so to speak, is Walter Nolan. I think Walter Nolan's a guy that's got all the tools, just the physical look, the ability. He's got all the tools, but maybe the production that wasn't quite as high. And his draft status is based upon projection and getting coached up in the NFL, as opposed to maybe just having an unbelievable season as an Ole Miss Rebel. But no, this defensive tackle class, there are some really good ones in that top 4, possibly top 5. But after that, you've got a lot of talent, but they're just second and third day dudes that you can bring in to help the team.
As you guys are talking defensive tackles, I can make anything about receiver. And watch this. I'm going to expertly do this. You're mentioning 2 guys from the same defensive line and how one can get overlooked. I'm immediately thinking about last year, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And what's one of the lessons? People slept on Brian Thomas Jr. because limited route tree.
I did. Yeah.
Right. And his yards per route run wasn't that impressive. It's like, well, Neighbors is on the team. And whether that was true of A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, you have these programs that are going to have stars. And the way I tend to look at that, guys, is, hey, he's playing next to a great player and he's great. Well, that's what the NFL often is. Like, you're playing next to another good player. So if someone else brings that out of you, that's good news to me. On Kenneth Grant, this is where I want to get to next with this. The idea of trading up. I am not against trading up. I know there are a lot of people out there that say never do it. It's not smart. But I think the blanket statement itself is just too broad. If I've got a perfect fit for what I need, a perfect idea, body type, everything fits the culture, positional need, then I'm not going to be afraid to do that, especially when, even though the Bills like to say they're not one player away, I am a couple plays away. Never mind player away. I'm a couple plays away. So I would spend draft capital. And if you think that Kenneth Grant's the perfect fit and it's going to take going to 22 to doing it, then I'm not going to be here being upset about it after the fact. If they feel like they've got not quite unicorn generational talent, but just the perfect fit, then I support it.
Well, I think there's a big difference between moving up from 30 to 22, which I think is totally reasonable. And then there's the other line of thinking that I see all the time that's, well, the Bills need absolute difference makers. And if they're going to trade up, mortgage everything, go get Abdul Carter, go crazy, get into the top 10, right? Like, that's a lot different than, hey, this is a perfect fit. We part with our 4th round pick. We move up, we get them. But that also hasn't always worked out for the Bills either, where they, but you could maybe make the case of Kyrie Elam with that trade was more of a, panic. We got to get a corner. We'll see what happens with Kincaid. They moved up. They traded the 4 for Edmonds. I guess that kind of worked. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. But, a modest move up versus, hey, we're going to give away everything because we need this one guy that we think can be a difference maker and we don't have enough of those. I think, that's where you get in trouble because, some of the premier players in the league are not high picks. I mean, you talk about Brian Thomas Jr., Jacksonville traded back and got him, right? Yeah. So, it's not always you have to trade up to get these players that you're looking for.
I think probably the ceiling for like that home run trade up into the first round to maybe get a guy that slips like a Will Johnson or a Jahdae Barron, because I think if you're going to go that high, you better be going to get one of those premier corners in my estimation, because I think that D tackle, even if you don't get one of those top 3-4 guys, I think it's deep enough to where you can get an impact dude a little bit later, whereas opposed corners not quite as deep. But I think 15 is probably about, if you're going to go home run, that's probably about the area. That would cost you your 30, and I think number 62, or I'm sorry, is it 62 we have? Or
56 and 62.
56 and 62. So it costs you your 30th and your 62, or possibly your 30th and your 52 to have the capital to move up to 15 to get one of those premier corners. But I'm like you, Jeremy. We don't need to stockpile a bunch of prospects and try to develop them, because as we're waiting to develop them, that's another 2 to 3 years. We've got the offense right now. And like we talked about earlier, with the fact that this whole offensive line situation could blow up in the next year and a half with contracts at center and right guard, we've got to get guys in that can go. And I think the other thing is this that nobody wants to look at is we talk about Ed Oliver being that guy. I watch Ed play a ton in college. We played Houston every year in Tulsa. So I've seen Ed play in college for as long as he was there. And Ed is a nice player. But Ed could really benefit from somebody to play next to him that's going to force a little bit of double team pressure and things like that, where it allows Ed to have that single block and get upfield, shoot gaps, and do what he does best. If you're wanting him to play double teams and eat up blocks, that's not his style. He's got to beat one single blocks and get hop behind blocks and retrace down the line of scrimmage, those types of things. If you can get a Grant or a Harmon or somebody in here to take that pressure off of him, that makes him that much better as well. And now we're better at 2 spots, not just one.
Piecing through the defensive side of Joe's big board. When we get back, we've got to talk about a big contract at center, how that affects the Bills. I want to ask you guys about Tre White, if that affects the corner conversation as well. So stay tuned. And Bill Squad, brought to you by, in part, the Armada Player of the Week. About to present our Armada Player of the Week. It's Kenneth Grant. We talked a lot about Kenneth Grant there because he is built like a Nissan Armada, heavy duty, rugged, conquers the road with capability and confidence, closes roads for opposing running backs, I suppose. But we're taking a look at draft prospects to pick one that stands apart, and Kenneth Grant, a name we talked about quite a bit there. So whether it's plug in the middle, making a difference, get a lot of high hipped and a lot of scout talk in there. It was good stuff. But Kenneth Grant's our Armada Player of the Week from the Michigan Wolverines. Sometimes pegged to go in the second round, sometimes in the first, and we're sitting here talking about maybe trading up for him. So it's clear that Kenneth Grant is ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada. For any of their outstanding vehicles, take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure and shop NissanUSA.com. All right, so gentlemen, we're back with Cam Jurgens contract, Tre'Davious White joining the Bills. I'll save the offensive big board maybe till Thursday. I mean, I'm going to want to dig in on those receivers, so we'll do that. But there's other NFL news and how it affects the Bills, and I thought I'd get your takes on this. Joe, I know you want to talk about the Cam Jurgens signing, a big contract for him in Philadelphia, and the Bills have a guy that they signed as a guard, and the thought was maybe he'll play center, and he did, and it went really well for them. So what do you make of the Jurgens contract and what it means for Connor McGovern? Is that top of things to do for the Bills?
It's a very big situation here because the Bills have done such a good job of getting extensions done with their players. And there's a couple that are dangling. One, of course, James Cook, and God, let's not do that today. The other one is Connor McGovern, who is mattered a lot for this Bills offensive line. A free agent signing that was a good player at left guard and then made the transition to center. And that was a big deal because, you come out of that 2023 season, you felt good about that Bills offensive line. And then they kind of blew it up and, releasing Mitch Morse, going to move McGovern over from left guard to center, put David Edwards in at left guard. And Connor McGovern made them right. And obviously the relationship seems really good with him and Josh Allen, which matters a ton. I'm sure Jerry can say a whole lot more than I can about protection calls and how the quarterback has to be on the same page with the center and, what the center means for the entire offensive line being right and setting protections. And, you've got the right guy in place, and now you got to think about keeping him around. And so he's in the last year of his deal. And he said on the Cover One Film Room a couple weeks ago when he was on with Eric Turner and Anthony Prohaska, he said, look, we had some negotiations early in the offseason. Those are tabled for now. Would love to stay in Buffalo, but, business is business. And that didn't give you the warm fuzzies about the guy sticking around. And you certainly don't want to be thinking about shaking up the offensive line again, although I have a lot of confidence in Aaron Kromer to coach guys up. But, you got an answer there in Connor McGovern. You'd like to keep him around. The challenge is this offensive line is getting expensive. Got a very expensive pair of tackles in Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins. And Connor McGovern's due for a big payday. And Cam Jurgens in this deal that he just signed with the Philadelphia Eagles, that's 4 years, $68 million that pays him $17 million a season, really gets you thinking, especially after you've had some big market resets at the center position. Creed Humphrey got $18 million per. Cam Jurgens at 17. Drew Dahlman signed with the Bears at $14 million a season. Frank Ragnow's gonna get re-upped and get a bunch of money. And Connor McGovern, where does he slide into this conversation? The Bills have done well to get some value on their extensions, but it seems like maybe swing one at getting a value deal with Connor McGovern didn't happen. And McGovern even said in that interview that, hey, he kind of left some money out there to go to Buffalo because he felt like it was the right fit. And, maybe he doesn't want to do that again. And so you're concerned about kind of the long term there with Connor McGovern, but then David Edwards, the Bills left guard, he's in the last year of his deal. And then, as Jerry has kind of hinted at a few times, O'Cyrus Torrence is trending towards being a very, very expensive right guard, as these guards are now getting north of $20 million a season. And, Torrence, if he takes a step forward this year, 3 years as a starter, he's going to be in that conversation for big money. Well, you can't pay them all in the NFL. So how do you sort this out? How do you prioritize? Point being is that these guys are getting expensive. They're good players, but maybe there is a long-term outlook conversation to have about what the Bills are going to do with this middle three.
Definitely. Connor McGovern, the Pennsylvania guy, coming out of high school, was the #1 rated center coming out of high school before he went to Penn State. Played some guard, went back to center, went to Dallas, obviously played a lot of guard. I watched a couple games of him down there before he came to Buffalo, as far as he was a backup at center down there. But he's every bit the player that Cam Jurgens is. He means a ton to this football team. And I know that everybody wants to focus on the left tackle position in football. They're like, the most important guy is your left tackle. Yeah, he's important. But if you don't have a guy to pivot that knows what the heck is going on, that can direct the guys up front, you don't have anything. Josh Allen and Connor McGovern had a seamless kind of a union this last 2 years, as far as him coming in after, Allen worked with Morris for so long. No issues with the snaps, no issues with communication. And when I look at this up front, if you got to figure out, okay, I got to choose one or two, I'm choosing Connor McGovern at center to give the big deal to before I worry about giving all that money to O'Cyrus Torrence. Now, I love O'Cyrus Torrence. Don't think I don't want him here. But if I have to make a choice, Um, 17's comfort is really, really important. And I can find two other guards. The Bills showed that with David Edwards. David Edwards, a kind of a journeyman, was with the Rams, and he shows up in the Buffalo, gives them that kind of guard body structure that they like, longer guys that can run. Torrance more of a power guy at the right guard, and he pairs really, really well with Spencer Brown because those two can move some people. But if I've got to make a decision, Connor McGovern's staying on this football team because he is a vital, vital piece to what they do up front.
You mentioned Torrance. This is a team that's had a pretty good offensive line for a long time, but it's not lost on me. They used to just cycle in guards the way that they do defensive tackles, right? Whether that's, I don't know, I'm sure who over the years they bring in for like Feliciano and Quentin Spain, and
right.
they got guys to play. Then they draft Torrance, and he's not like he's the final piece, but Torrance and David Edwards, now they have a really good offensive line, and we kind of get to the point of, well, do you let a guy walk again and just draft a second-round pick? Should they be addressing offensive line in the later rounds? I know sometimes interior line isn't sexy for people like me to talk about, but not scratch-off tickets. These are insurance policies for injury or for, hey, we priced ourselves out because we have too many good offensive linemen.
Jeremy, I thought for a long time guard was a black eye on Brandon Beane's resume. You mentioned some of those guys, but even extending Quentin Spain and then, cutting him
right
early in the next season. Yeah. Spencer Long, Brian Winters, Cody Ford really didn't work out. Like, there were some missteps along the way, and the Bills' offensive line is really stabilized, I think, in part to finding actual answers at the guard position. Even Roger Saffold was a swing and a miss. I have a lot of comfort in Aaron Kromer and his ability to coach these guys up, and it leads me to wonder some of the reserves that they have. A guy like Alec Anderson, who's kind of been the utility guy, the big tight end. We saw David Edwards go from that to the left guard job, and that seemed to work out pretty well. Has he been in the pipeline long enough for him to potentially be an answer? What about Cedric Van Pran Granger, a very productive starter for Georgia? Leadership, is he an option for one of those spots? Tylen Grable is a guy that really fascinates me. Bills late round pick last year out of UCF. I thought his preseason was phenomenal. He in fact won the swing tackle job, but he's the guy that measurables wise, like he's played tackle. He has the exact same measurables as David Edwards, like literally across the board. And he got some run at guard during camp last year. So I'm wondering, between that mix, do they have a starter? Obviously there wouldn't be much proof of concept barring an injury this year, but have they had some guys working through that can be viewed as successors? It's probably some of that plus some investment to find the right mix, but it's Torrance I think, to Jerry's point, I don't know that they can pay Torrance and McGovern, and I think I'm picking the center as well.
I think a couple of things, and I'm with you, Joe, on the Kromer situation. The thing that impresses me about Aaron Kromer, most of the time offensive line coaches come in and they say, this is what I teach, this is what you're going to do. All five guys across the front are going to do the same thing. And I think Kromer does a really good job of seeing who he has and taking the strengths of his players and tweaking what he wants to utilize their abilities. I don't think everybody does the exact same thing. We love Deion Dawkins. Deion Dawkins is an amazing left tackle. If you study his technique, it is horrific. And I don't think that, but it works for Deion because he's a freak. I mean, he's kind of like he's like Randall McDaniel back in the day, who had that crazy stance, right? And you're like, how do you get out of that stance? Well, Randall had to be in the stance that slowed him down because he was so athletic. He just never meshed with blocks, right? So you look at Deion and what he does works. And then you look at Spencer Brown, who is more of a drive catch guy in pass pro. He's more of your prototypical, what everybody's teaching nowadays. So he's able to mold these guys and get them to do what he wants by utilizing their strengths. And, it's funny, you talk about Van Pran Granger. I think while at center in the NFL, maybe he's at a disadvantage because he's not a second level. He's not great at the second level. He's not as nimble. That's what makes Connor McGovern so good. He's so athletic and long. He's so great at the second level. He's kind of as close to what we've had to Kent Hull as far as the center goes since Kent Hull left. Kent was long and athletic, was able to high body and bar people and things like that. So Van Pran Granger is more of I think if he's playing in the 80s and he's got that big fat nose guard right over his face every time, he's wrecking shop. You move him to guard, now all of a sudden he can utilize those strengths out of guard because he's got a 3 technique on him. He's got an inside shade on him. So maybe you can move him out and do those things. Alec Anderson's a guy that intrigues me. I don't know as far as just a pure body mover, I don't know if he's that guy, but I think he maybe can do some of the things that Edwards does. I mean, I think bringing in that extra guy at the end of the line of scrimmage is great because it gets young kids in the game, gets them involved, and they get reps. So we do have some possible answers. Like Joe, I think Grable's incredibly fascinating. Could maybe be a swing guard and swing tackle, but I don't think it'd be a bad idea to look at offensive line late this year to maybe bring in a guy that you can start getting in the system and learning so that when somebody, if something does happen and they leave, you've got another option to put right in there.
We're doing Bills Squad every Monday and Thursday, part of the Locked On Bills feed. One thing that's different about this is we do this show live. You can watch it on YouTube. You can chat. Right now, the chat is after me for saying interior offensive line isn't sexy. I wasn't saying linemen can't be sexy. Just sometimes it's not the sexiest position to talk about for the draft. There's a reason you watch ESPN, you're going to get them, hours and hours on Shedeur Sanders, and they're not going to really talk too much about the guards that are going in the
Hey,
first.
I played interior offensive line. I think I'm sexy.
That's right.
No doubt.
It's not about the people. Sometimes they call them the big uglies. There's a million different phrases for the interior offensive line. So anyway, I just want to get that out there. And if you want to ever, jump in with us live and jump on the chat, and we can bring up your comments and your questions as we go. Tre'Davious White, we'll get a break in. We'll get on the other side, talk about Tre'Davious White. The Bills bring him back and what that could mean for their draft plans. So stick with us. That's coming up. All right, we are back with Bills Squad, part of Locked On Bills. If you're on the Locked On Bills feed, I make it my first listen every day. I listen to Joe driving in to work. I get up early, Joe, so I'm glad you dropped that thing as early as you do because I'm listening to you on my drive-in before I do my show on WGR here in Buffalo, and you can make Locked On Bills your first listen. You can make this show your first listen if you want because this shows up right in the same feed, and we'll be doing 2 episodes a week, Jeremy White, Joe Marino, and Jerry Ostroski with you. So hopefully you're enjoying it. We're having a good time. And what did I say we're going to get to? I always forget. Tre'Davious White. Does Tre'Davious White change anything for what the Bills are going to do? I mean, he adds depth. He adds a floor. The vibes are good. Everybody loves Trey, right? I mean, he was an all-timer. He's a Wall of Famer for the Bills. So is it affecting corner at all in what they do Thursday?
Jerry, I've went first, I think, every time. Why don't you chop it up on this one?
I don't think it does, and here's why. I think, if anything, it maybe gives the Bills a really unique opportunity to take corner early or with their first pick and bring him into the building to where he gets to have a locker sitting next to Tre'Davious White. I talked to Marlon Kerner, a former teammate of mine who was a cornerback with the Buffalo Bills. He said the thing that people will overlook with this Tre'Davious White signing is the amount of leadership and knowledge that he brings into the building. I mean, tremendous leader, well-respected, knows the system. What better way to get a young corner up to speed than pairing him with a guy like Tre'Davious White, who's had the career that he's had in Buffalo? I think that, you look at this contract, we still haven't got the particulars yet, but like Joe, I can't imagine it's got a ton of guaranteed money or a ton of, big money. It's probably incentive laden. It was a win-win. Tre'Davious gets to play football another year, and we get to bring a great player into the locker room that has a tremendous amount of history. So if anything, to me, I think it helps with taking this cornerback early in the draft because you get to pair him with Trey and you get to let him teach him and mold him and get him ready to get on the field.
Yeah, it certainly helps with that. I know the Bills really value having a veteran in the room, and Christian Benford's entering his 4th season, but Trey White, a foundational player for this organization and this iteration of the Bills. Dane Jackson as well, bringing some leadership. I think that the Bills signed Tre'Davious White with some belief that he can be the starter, and not that changes the draft plan. I think the Bills are still going to pick a cornerback early because they want a long-term answer, and I don't think Tre'Davious White is that. But I think it matters a lot that Trey White was healthy last year. I know that, of course, he didn't really work out with the Rams, but things kind of came back a bit when he was with Baltimore and got a chance to play pretty extensively in their dime packages and played a lot better. I'm not going to say he was vintage Trey White, but he played a lot better and is in a position now to help this Bills defense. And What's challenging for me about Tre'Davious White is if he's not a starter, what is he? He's not going to help you a lick on special teams.
No.
And so do you really want another Kyrie Elam situation where it's either they start or they're inactive because, they're not going to give you any fourth down value, which is important in filling out your roster. And so I think there's some corners in this draft that are a little bit risky that the Bills might have their eye on, whether it's Savone Revel out of East Carolina coming off of an ACL tear from early in the 2024 campaign. Darian Porter has all the ceiling in the world, but he's played with 7 or 8 starts in his career at Iowa State. Think about Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, 2 hip injuries and a shoulder in the last 4 years. Are they thinking about those types of players being their path at corner and not only having a hedge with a player like Tre'Davious White to, make sure that you have something that can go, but take the pressure off of starting that player right away. And even if they draft a corner that they love, the pressure of having to make them play right away is eased by the arrival of Tre'Davious White.
Which is something the last couple of draft picks that have come in have been under pressure to play right away. Keon Coleman, they desperately needed a help at that position. Dalton Kincaid, when they drafted him, they were looking for pass catcher. I feel like if it's a first round corner, being a little bit insulated behind, as Joe kind of just laid that out, like that makes sense to me that player will be under a little bit less pressure.
And I think going back to the cornerback talk, I think you have to wonder just how much Brandon Beane and McDermott learned from the mistake of drafting Kyrie Elam and his development. And do they now know a little bit more than they did in the past and are set up to not make that same mistake again with obvious need at corner and possibly drafting one with your first pick in this draft? So how much that has molded the decision-making as well.
Tre'Davious White's back. Didn't Derek Forrest take number 27 for 5 minutes? Is he going to give it back to Tre'Davious White?
Yeah, that's an easy one, right? I mean, you see some of these athletes, they go and they, might want like a new chapter, but coming back to Buffalo, right? Like you got to be 27. I think a lot of people with those jerseys, they've already been burned a few times, right? Cook changes number, Terrell Bernard changes number, Taron Johnson changing his number. Tre'Davious White, at least you can pull that one out of the closet and feel like you got a jersey.
I want to ask you guys thoughts about Travis Hunter, just because, we're approaching the draft. We'll only get so many days left to talk about him. He's such a unique prospect. I mean, no expectation the Bills will have any chance to even sniff Travis Hunter. But how do you think it plays out, or how should it play out? He wants to play both. A team lets him. I saw he is asking the commissioner to introduce him as cornerback and wide receiver. So when that little chime goes, do, and Goodell goes to the podium, he's asked to be introduced as both, and he's telling teams he wants to be both. He's even gone so far as to say he would retire if he can't do both. So how should it play out?
I feel like I have an unpopular opinion here. And let me start by saying this. I think Travis Hunter is a special talent. He's a top 2 player in this class for me. I'd be over the moon excited if I was a team that got Travis Hunter on my football team. I think a little bit of this is ridiculous. Like, don't you want a guy that's going to come in and say, whatever the team wants me to do, I want to do it. Like, I want to do whatever it takes to help the team. If that's offense, if that's defense, versus, if I don't play both ways, I'm going to retire. I'm not playing. Like, come on. Like, is that a little bit weird? Maybe I'm old or something and not up to date, but I don't know. I don't love that messaging. It wouldn't move me off of drafting him, and I think he should get a chance to play both sides. There's ways to do this, but to be this emphatic about it, like, I love the confidence, but come on now. This is a different game here going to the NFL.
Well, you have to believe he's following the Deion Sanders playbook word for word and line for line. I mean, Deion calls him his son for goodness sakes. So he's obviously learned from the best self-marketer in sport. I think that if you want to play him here and there as a receiver and some package stuff, that's fine. 4 wides and stuff like that. But you're drafting him because he backpedals really, really well. And he's a difference maker at cornerback. And while I think I can find some things for him to do offensively that'll keep him happy and hopefully keep him quiet, his value is at corner to me. And that's where he plays the majority of his snaps. And again, difference maker. But, I mean, come on, guys. I mean, he just had his jersey retired with Shedeur Sanders. I mean, really? I mean, it is what it is, but I just think that you give him enough to keep him happy, but you know that he's a cornerback.
Isn't his best path, though, like if he's going to really do this, he has to play full-time at corner and then sometimes at receiver. I don't. Does it make
Yes.
sense for it to be the other way? You can't play sometimes at corner, right? Like that's kind of goofy to me.
And if you look at his injury situation in college, it was usually when he was at receiver and he was getting, he got hit and stuff like that. When he had the shoulder and on the sideline, he got hit and went out for a while, didn't play some games. He'll think differently when he goes across the middle to catch something and gets absolutely smoked. It'll be a little bit different. He'll know that it's much better to give hits than to receive hits in the NFL.
Yeah, when you really start to dig into what it would mean, I'm seeing some comparisons. He could be Justin Jefferson. Okay, that sounds great. I don't want Justin Jefferson running up in run support. That's not something I want. Why would anybody want that for their best player, one of their best players? So I love the idea of him, and it would be really cool if it worked out, but it will take 10 minutes into game one where fans of that team are saying, enough with this, especially if he can. I just think if he can catch touchdowns, it's going to be hard to convince any fan of that team not to want him on the field at all times. So like you said, Joe, it probably makes the most sense to be full-time corner, part-time receiver. But if you're so good as a part-time receiver, I don't know a coach that would be able to not want you as a full-time receiver and not expect that from you.
Well, he's going to Cleveland, right? Is that kind of the general consensus?
Seems so.
It feels like it. The GM's talking about Shohei Ohtani and Travis Hunter. I don't think you say that if that's not going to be introduced to your fan base here in a couple of days. And the interesting thing about Cleveland is I think that they legitimately could use help at receiver and corner. It's not like when we were talking about him going to the Patriots, right? If that was going to be a possibility. Well, all right, the Mike Vrabel thing's interesting, but they have Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez as their outside corner. They need help at receiver. You kind of saw the path with Cleveland. I legitimately think that it's pretty wide open, and I think you know what you're signing up for. Like he's been pretty straightforward on his intentions. My question is, what happens when maybe it doesn't happen? When there's a game where he doesn't play both sides, where it's just clearly better for him to do a certain thing? Have we dug our heels in so deep that there's really no return, and we're setting ourselves up for weird conversations if this doesn't happen?
But I think also, too, Travis needs to understand, 12 games is completely different than 17 plus 3 or 4 plus playoffs. It's a different world. And I think that the other thing that I'm intrigued about is you understand that Deion probably pretty much let him do what he wanted to do. He probably didn't practice much during the week. He was in the hot tub. He was in the cold plunge. He was doing all that stuff. That's not necessarily how it works in the NFL. Your availability is what makes you, what makes you great. You need to be available. You need to be practicing. You need to be playing. So does he roll in thinking he can do the same things he did in Colorado because he had liberties? It's a different world. And it's fine to talk about it now, but until you actually experience it, it's a whole different story.
It's definitely exciting. Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, the top guys at the draft. Ashton Jeanty, dream landing spot.
Man, you could tell me so many spots. Like I think all of a sudden Jacksonville's in play, the Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders.
I mean, how far does he get down? I mean, could Chicago, like he's not getting past Chicago.
No, I don't think
so.
so.
What Ben Johnson enjoyed from David Montgomery in Detroit to be able to bring him there. So I think it's probably one of those three teams. I think most logically it would be Chicago, but feels like there's a lot of steam for him to go to Jacksonville at 5, which I guess is just something we have to open our minds to. It speaks to the unpredictability of this draft.
I saw Adam Schefter suggest Tet McMillan to Jacksonville at 5. And I mean, they've got Brian Thomas Jr. and I mean, Gabe Davis is going to be. Is Gabe Davis back here in 20 minutes? I mean, how long until the Gabe Davis?
Is he
reunion?
The next one? Jesus.
Is he not the favorite for the reunion? I mean,
please.
They loved a lot of things about him, and he went. He went to Jacksonville. Did not really go very well. So,
who could have saw it coming, Jeremy? Who could have ever saw that Gabe Davis is exactly the player he's always been? A limited. They gave him that deal. Now it's different. James Gladstone, their new GM, didn't sign him to that deal. So, nothing is safe. I'm sure they'll get out of it as soon as they can, but I'm still trying to figure out what Jacksonville was thinking when they move forward with that contract.
Yeah. Well, this was our first Bills squad. Feedback, I guess, available. If anybody wants to, send it our way, you know where to reach us. We're on, Twitter and all over the place. Yeah, we're on Mondays and Thursdays. We'll be doing it live. Posts right in your feed. So I'll be getting right to my Locked On Bills feeds right there. And Joe, what's going on tomorrow? What's on the docket for tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm excited. We hear from Brandon Bean later on Tuesday, so that'll be interesting, or maybe not. He'll probably say a bunch of nothing, but we'll certainly break that down. But I think on tomorrow's Locked On Bills, I want to kind of go in on some prospects where predictively I think the Bills are really in on them. So I've got a long list of players that I'm predictively thinking could be Bills, and then I also got to give my doomsday players, right? The guys that I just don't want this team to come anywhere near. And so I definitely am going to sign myself up for some of those players to be Bills, and then I'll have to have weird conversations later in the week when they draft them. But I think I'm going to plant my flag, both good and bad, on tomorrow's Locked On Bills.
All right, very good. Plenty of stuff we thought we would get to. We didn't. I think that's probably how this is going to go most weeks. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. You can find us, of course, in the Locked On Bills podcast right in the show page. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere. And cheers. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.